All right, now we want to refine a few things to build a logical model. The first one is the relationships between these entities. So let's talk about the relationship between passengers and tickets. A passenger can buy many tickets, but each ticket is issued for only a single passenger. So here we have a one-to-many relationship between the passenger and the ticket. So I'm going to open up the right panel, select this relationship, and change one end from many to one. There you go. So we have one to many. Now, what about ticket and flight? Again, here we have a one-to-many relationship because each ticket is issued for a particular flight, but a flight can have many different tickets. So I'm going to select this relationship and change this second end to 1. So we have a one-to-many relationship between flight and ticket. Next one. What about the flight and airport? Well, each airport can host many different flights, but each flight works with 2 and only 2 airports. Now, in entity relationship diagrams, we don't have 2, we only have 1 and many. So we can still treat this relationship as a many-to-many relationship because a flight deals with multiple airports and an airport hosts multiple flights. Now let's set the type for each attribute. So IATA code is going to be a string. Let's type that here. Name is also going to be a string. Also city and state. What about flight number? Well, in this example, we're dealing with a 4-digit number. But sometimes airlines use a combination of letters and numbers, so number is technically a string. Departure date time is going to be a date time. We need both the date and the time. Same is true for arrival. What about duration? Well, we can measure duration in seconds, minutes, hours, or even days. In the case of flight, it's better to measure the duration in minutes because we might have a flight that is, let's say, 35 minutes long. We don't care about the seconds, we only care about the minutes. So I would prefer to rename this attribute to duration in minutes. This is more descriptive. Nobody is going to guess what this number represents. Is it the seconds? Is it the hours? Is it the days? It's very clear. So duration in minutes, and this is going to be an integer. What about the distance? This is also going to be an integer. But here I want to rename this attribute to distance in miles. So again, there is no guesswork. And we can also convert this number and display the distance in kilometers if we want to. Next, we have airline. We can set the type of this attribute to a string. But with this structure, we're going to end up duplicating the name of the airline. So it's better to represent airline as a separate entity that has a code or a number as well as a name. So let me bring back our design panel and add a new entity here. We're going to call this airline. Airline. All we need to know about each airline right now is their name. This is going to be a string. Now we should add a relationship between the flight and the airline. Each airline has many flights, but each flight is operated by a single airline. So we have a one-to-many relationship. Where is that here? It's over here. All right. Now let me move this around. So we have a one-to-many relationship between the airline and the flight. And with this, we can remove the airline attribute from here. That is better. All right. The name of each passenger is also a string. But here we want to split this into the first name and the last name. So first name is going to be a string. Last name is going to be a string as well. What else do we have here? Finally, the ticket. So the ticket number right now is a 10-digit number. We're not going to perform any calculations on this number. This is just a label. So I'm going to use a string for this. Price is going to be float because we have a decimal point. Flight class, again, here we can use a string, but we'll end up duplicating the flight class. So it's better to model this as a separate entity. So I'm going to add a new entity here. Move it on the top. Let's call this flight class. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is called flight class in this domain. This is one of those cases that you need to talk to the domain experts to see what they call it. So for now, let's just add the name attribute here. And then we need to add a relationship between these two entities. Now, a ticket is issued for a particular flight class, but a flight class can have several tickets. So here we have a one-to-many relationship. So here's the one-to-many relationship between the flight class and ticket. Finally, we need to set the type for confirmation number. Again, this is going to be a string. Now, back to our airport entity. With this design, we'll end up duplicating the city and state and potentially the country. So shouldn't we take out these attributes and model them as separate entities like countries, states, and cities? So a country can have multiple states and a state can have multiple cities. That is the proper normalized form. So in theory, yes, this is better. We reduce data duplication. But the problem with this is that our data will end up being so fragmented. Quite often, if not always, we need to join these 3 or 4 tables together to look up airports in a given city. These joins can hurt the performance of our applications. So in situations where we want to improve the performance, we should denormalize our tables. So tables that are frequently joined together, we combine them into a single table. This is one of those examples. With this design, we don't have to constantly join these tables together. And take into account that we're not going to have a million airports in the world. We have a limited number of airports. Not every city has an airport. So the duplication we're dealing with here is not a big deal. So in this particular case, I prefer to denormalize our design and add the city and state attributes here. And one last thing before I finish this lecture. Here we have a many-to-many relationship between the airport and the flight entities. But as I told you before, in relational databases, we don't have many-to-many relationships. We only have one-to-one and one-to-many. Whenever you have a many-to-many relationship, you need to break it down into 2 one-to-many relationships. And we do that through a link table, a table that represents the relationship between 2 entities or 2 tables. Now here we can add a link table, but the problem with that link table is that it allows a flight to have an association with more than 2 airports. Because with a link table, we can have a many-to-many relationship. But as I told you before, each flight only deals with exactly 2 airports. So in this particular case, I prefer not to use a link table. And instead, I prefer to add 2 attributes here: departure airport, arrival airport, just like departure date time and arrival date time. So let's add those here as well. Departure airport, let's say ID. This is going to be the ID of the departure airport. So an integer. And also arrival airport ID, also an integer. So when we build a physical model based on this logical model, we'll need to add foreign keys on these 2 columns. So here's our final model. You can download this as a PDF right below this video. This is just based on what we know about this problem right now. So don't take this as the best or as the only solution for this kind of problem. There is no such a thing. Every solution has pros and cons. This is what I have come up with during this modeling session. Tomorrow, if I look at the same problem, I will come up with a different solution. The chances are my solutions are going to be very similar or even identical. But the point here is that as we learn more about the problem, about the business domain, our model changes. Just one last thing. I noticed that here in the ticket entity, I forgot to remove the flight class attribute after I added the flight class entity. So let's delete this from here. Okay, we're done with this model. I hope you learned a lot. I leave it up to you to build a physical model for this because that's very repetitive and I already showed you the steps earlier in this section.